Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. Storm that's moving through the region right now is going to bring rain and snow, mainly to Wyoming, parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, northwest Colorado, and northeastern Utah. This storm is about 1/5 the size of the storm that happened a week ago, but it's going to be a moist storm for some parts, especially Wyoming and parts of those southwest areas of South Dakota, northwest Nebraska. The rest of the week, though, we go back to fair, dry weather again. In fact, Wednesday through Saturday and most of Sunday, the weather really quite nice again. And then the next storm will arrive next week, probably around next Tuesday with a pretty good Pacific front. Then another storm system is going to come around Halloween weekend. So the weather pattern, as we've been mentioning over the last week or two, going to get more busy towards the end of the month. Also, we're going to talk about western precipitation this month of October has been surprisingly wet and going to get more wet, especially for some of the western areas of the United States that really need it. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Here's the satellite photo from this morning. The satellite really showing the counterclockwise spin of the clouds with the low right here in extreme northwest Colorado, basically near Dinosaur. And you can see, if you look real closely, a swirl of clouds right there. And then, as we always talk, the heavier precipitation with low pressure systems is always to the northwest of the low center. Drier conditions south and southeast of the low center. The system is going to track slowly like this during the course of the day today before accelerating later tonight and tomorrow up into South Dakota. But you can see the enhancement. The blue here shows the colder cloud tops. Where the colder cloud tops are, that's where the heavier precipitation has been falling overnight and early this morning. In fact, Lander, Wyoming, picked up over 1 inch of rain overnight. Rain, not snow. Now, up in the mountains, it's been snow, but Lander, over 1 inch. Riverton, about a 1/2 inch, about 1/4 of an inch of rain in Casper. So really good to see that precipitation. So here's the low. This is where we are now. And then it's going to be moving northeast later on today and tonight. So if we zoom in closely, you can really see the structure of the low. And the closed circles here mean the system is giving you that counterclockwise spinning motion, bringing the air, the moist air back up into the Rockies and really upslope into the Wind River Mountains here and into the mountains of central Wyoming and the southern Bighorns. This is the precipitation forecast here through the next couple of days. And you can see this east-west swath of heavier precipitation is aligned that axis to the north of the low. The big winners will be Natrona County, Fremont County, Converse County, Niobrara County, into the Pine Ridge of Nebraska and South Dakota. This is going to be about half rain, half snow. All snow in the higher mountain areas where the snowpack has gotten off to a pretty good start here in October up high, and this is just going to add to it. If you were to look at snowfall amounts, you can see they're going to be pretty good. But again, this is going to be a wet spring-like snow, so there's going to be melting, there's going to be settling. So around 5,000 feet or so, it's going to be a wet snow accumulating several inches. You get it 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet. That's where the snow is going to pile up and be heavier. So the Wind River Mountains, the Beaver Rim area, the northern part of the Laramie Range, Casper Mountain, Laramie Peak area, then up into the southern Bighorns, and I even think up into the Owl Creek Mountains around the Thermopolis area are going to get into the act as well. As we get into Friday and the weekend, high pressure builds over the central Rockies right here, and what we're going to see is a return by Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and part of Sunday into some very mild weather conditions, and it's going to be another nice weekend. A little breezy, but another nice October weekend. That'll be 3 in a row. But see all the blue up here? This is some really cold, moist air up in the Aleutians and the northern Gulf of Alaska. Notice how all of these black lines, these straight black lines, see how they're packed together right here? There is a really big contrast in temperature, cold here, warmer here. The bigger the contrast between the warm and the cold, the bigger difference in temperature in the upper atmosphere, the stronger the jet stream winds become. When you get that temperature gradient, that makes a lot of things happen. So what we're going to see developing is cold, moist conditions developing up here in the Gulf of Alaska, strong jet stream winds heading to California and the Pacific coast. And if you were to go back and take a look at the northern hemisphere, we're looking down from space, looking at the North Pole right here. You see all the blue on the other side of the globe over here? That is some really cold air up at 18,000 feet that's building on the other side of the globe. And some of it is coming over to Siberia, coming into the North Pacific. And this is setting the stage for what is going to be some wet weather along the West Coast that they desperately need. We're going to see a wedge of these strong jet stream winds and moisture come in Monday and Tuesday to Washington, Oregon, and California, maybe all the way into Southern California. Now, this should be making news based on how bad the drought's been in California. As we look at the jet stream winds, this is by Monday morning. You see these powerful, the red here and the gray. These are really strong jet stream winds that are getting driven right into the West Coast. When you get these strong jet stream winds, the atmosphere gets lifted into the Sierra Nevada. It gets lifted off the Pacific and into the coastal areas of California. And when you lift air, when air is forced to rise, it cools, it condenses, and if there's moisture available, you get clouds and you get precipitation. This is a classic setup for Central and Northern California and Washington and Oregon to see significant rain with these strong jet stream winds. And it's all being driven by the accumulation of some really cold air up here in the higher latitudes. And if you were to look at the precipitation forecast over the next 10 days, now whether or not we get this much, we'll see. But we're talking over 6 inches of potential water equivalent in the Sierra Nevada, 6 inches along the coast of north central California into southwest Oregon here. I mean, this is showing 13 inches of water. I don't know if we're going to see that. But even east of the Cascades, there's going to be some precipitation. And eventually what happens is this energy and moisture gets driven inland, and part of the northern Rockies, the Tetons, Wyoming's Western Mountains, the Wasatch, Idaho's mountains, and Montana's mountains, they pick up some of those jet stream winds driving in. Now, this is something that will happen sometimes when you have a maturing La Niña or a strengthening La Niña, because you get this big contrast in temperature causing a strong jet stream wind. So this could do wonders, a real shot in the arm for California if this develops, and our confidence is growing that it will. Most of this comes next week and into the Halloween weekend. If you were to look at the latest snow and ice map for the Northern Hemisphere, look how much the snow cover has increased across Siberia, parts of Northern Asia, snow cover building here, snow cover accumulating in Alaska, the Northwest Territories, Greenland. So the cold air is building, and that's why we're seeing a lot of development here of these strong jet stream winds, and this is going to be playing a role as the fall matures into early winter. Look at the snowfall forecast over the next 15 days for the Northern Hemisphere. Getting to be pretty winter-like up there in those higher latitudes. And even look at North America. Look at the lower 48 states over the next 2 weeks, even into the western Great Lakes. We're starting to see snow showing up, then across the Sierra Nevada and the western United States. Sea surface temperature map, we showed you this yesterday. The La Niña is really starting to come back. These cold sea surface temperatures right here, I talked about that contrast. This is why it's so important to keep track of sea surface temperatures. Very warm sea surface temperatures, very cool sea surface temperatures, strong jet stream winds developing along this. So that's why we're confident that this area here is about ready to see the best precipitation they've seen in maybe a year in the coming weeks. Last week, we talked about the stratosphere, how the stratosphere was going to go through a warm phase later in October. When it gets warm in the higher stratosphere, that makes the atmosphere expand, and that starts to push those colder air masses south into the lower latitudes. So we're still seeing that. So what we're doing here is we're setting the table for you. We're setting the table for a colder, more unsettled late October, early November, with some cold episodes probably in November looking likely. Have yourself a great Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.